Thank you for those people who sent questions over. We'll go ahead and type those up and get them out to all the attendees, making sure that everybody gets exposure to those questions and the answers. Next, we're going to move on to dermakinetics. And we've talked about how light therapy can be used all by itself, but light therapy can also be used in conjunction with our new patented dermakinetics transdermal delivery process. And when you use these two together, you get more immediate effects from the dermakinetics and the long-term effects from Lightwave. So it helps with customer buy-in and client participation. It really helps to give them more of the wow effect up front, as well as the long-term benefits that light therapy can offer. So let's talk about what is dermakinetics and how it works. In order to understand dermakinetics, we first have to talk about what is transdermal delivery and make sure we're all on the same page about what I'm talking about when we talk about transdermal delivery. In general, transdermal delivery is defined as the movement of topical compounds across the stratum corneum and into the layers of skin below. Current examples of transdermal delivery processes would be the passive delivery. You have the nicotine patch. You wear it over a period of time, and slowly but surely nicotine is delivered into the body through the skin. Iontophoresis, or microcurrent or galvanic, is another form of transdermal delivery where we use positive and negative charges in order to drive topicals across the stratum corneum into the layers of tissue below. And the biggest thing right now is the skin microneedling. We actually puncture the skin with fine holes in order to deliver large amounts of topicals into the layers below. Now, what is transdermal delivery specifically? First, we have to understand that the skin membrane limits the molecular transport from and into the body. So the whole job of the skin is to keep the bad out, allow only the good in. So the goal of transdermal delivery is helping the body to recognize, hey, we want to get these things that are out here into the body. How do we overcome the barrier function of the skin? Because what we think is good for the body may not recognize and go, oh yeah, I'm going to let that in. The gatekeeper simply does not allow that to happen, especially if it's large molecules. So when we look at transdermal delivery and we look at the skin membrane, especially the stratum corneum, we have to find ways to get past that barrier in order to get large amount of topicals into the skin. Now, the potential pathways of topical delivery, when we look at them, we have three main potential pathways, how things can be delivered into the body. And we look at those appendages here. We can see that the appendage route would be our sweat ducts, our hair follicles, our sebaceous glands. That would be sections number 2 and 3. Or we can take a look at simply going across the stratum corneum, which is number 1. Now, when we look at the appendage route versus just going across the stratum corneum, it's very, very difficult to get something in across the stratum corneum unless it's very, very small. So molecular size comes into account when we look at how we're going to deliver something. And then if we're delivering it in through the appendages, through the sweat glands, or through the hair follicles, only so much can go in. When we look at how much of the body is comprised of sweat glands and hair follicles, it's approximately less than 1% of the total coverage area. So a lot of people go, well, there seems to be a lot of hair follicles and sweat glands. Well, sweat glands and hair follicles diminish over time. The older we get, there's less and less available that work. And the amount that already is there is already less than 1%, which is why when we're trying to deliver across the stratum corneum, we have to take into account the size of the molecules in order to get them delivered. Most things, when we look at delivering them into the body, will take what's known as the path of least resistance, the intercellular route. They're compounds that are going to go through and around the cells of the stratum corneum and travel through the hair and sweat gland openings to reach into the skin. The intercellular route is now considered to be the major pathway for permeation of most topicals. So when we're looking at trying to get topicals from the outside in, they're going to take the intercellular route. None of them just go directly into the transcellular route without a needle injection. So when we look at techniques to optimize permeation of topicals across the skin, we need to make sure that it's going to be soluble in the lipid form if we want it to passively go in, which means that if we're wanting it to just go like a nicotine patch from the top to the bottom, we have to make sure that it can get from the top to the bottom, taking the intercellular route. However, we look at a lot of topicals now on the market. The topicals are great. The delivery process and how we get them where they need to go is very, very poor in comparison. Scientifically, we have far exceeded the type of topicals we can come up with in comparison to its delivery process or how we're going to get it into the body. So we have lots of major wonderful topicals out there, but we can't get them into the body where it can be utilized by the tissue below because it can't travel through the intercellular route. So what we have to do is we have to take what's known as the 500 Dalton rule into consideration. And the 500 Dalton rule determines what goes in the skin and what stays out. So imagine the skin is like a screen. The skin will allow small particles in. The large particles are filtered and kept out. So the small particles can travel into and through the intercellular route, where the large particles are kept out by what's known as the 500 Dalton rule. Now, 500 Dalton rule says that anything that has a molecular weight can be expressed in Daltons. So just like we weigh ourselves in pounds, you can weigh molecules in Daltons. And that's basically taking all the atoms, adding them together, and that gives you its Dalton weight, or its molecular weight. So when we look at that, we have to look at what's known as the 500 Dalton rule. If it's more than 500 Daltons, it's not going to passively go into the skin. If it's less than 500 Daltons, then it will go into the skin, and the lower the Dalton number is, the easier it will go into the skin. So first we have to take into consideration that the human skin is an excellent barrier. Its job is to keep things out that shouldn't be there. That's why we don't get infection, which is great. Now the stratum corneum is our main barrier function. That's pretty much the job of the stratum corneum. Keep everything out that shouldn't go in, allow other things in. Now as the molecular weight increases, it approaches the 500 Dalton mark, less skin penetration occurs. So skin penetration decreases as molecular weight increases. And as a molecule approaches 500 Daltons, skin penetration and permeation approaches 0. Now a small amount is always going to be able to permeate the skin regardless of molecular weight because it can get in through sebaceous gland and hair follicles to some degree. And some will find where the stratum corneum isn't working properly and allow some of it to go in. But very little will make its way in if it's larger than 500 Daltons. Now when we talk about hydrophilic topicals, that means it's a water-loving topical. It will permeate the skin less than an oil-loving or lipophilic product. So when you look at products that you put on top of the skin, if it's a water-based product, it's not going to travel as easily and as far as an oil-based product by nature. That means if I'm just putting it on the skin and allowing passive permeation. So whatever I put on the top layer of the skin, and if I want it to just go into the layers below, the goal is to make sure that that's an oil-loving product. That's going to be lipophilic. I know then it's going to go further into the layers below. So there's science that goes into determining what is going to go where. If I just want it to sit on top of the skin, I'm going to make sure that it's a water-based product. If I want it to go further, I'm going to make sure it's an oil-based product. Now we know a lot of the oil-based products, however, can cause congestion. So now we have our acne clients, we want to use a water-based product instead of an oil-based product. However, we can't do so knowing that it's not going to travel very far. So there's things to take into consideration when you're looking at topical delivery. Now when we take a look at the 30 different FDA-approved transdermal drugs, which means that are drugs that are just put on the skin and allowed to permeate all by themselves without any kind of mechanical changes to it, they're all less than 430 Daltons molecular. Okay, so just to kind of recap molecules in the 500 Dalton rule. For a molecule to be delivered passively through the stratum corneum, it has to have two main things. It has to have a molecular weight less than 500 Daltons, and it has to have adequate oil-loving properties or be lipophilic. So when we look at putting something on the skin and we want it to penetrate, we need to make sure it's small, and that it's oil-based. If it has a molecular weight greater than 500 Daltons and it's not lipophilic, we have to find some other way to get it in. It's not going to go in all by itself. So we either have to do a mechanical changes, such as abrading, ablating, or perforating the skin, like the microneedling. We can use electrical methods, such as the iontophoresis or electroporation, where we have a positive and negative charge associated with it. We can use energy-related techniques, such as ultrasound and needleless injections. Or we can use the new process known as dermakinetics, which is really exciting because of all the different topicals that can be delivered using dermakinetics. So, as we've kind of said, as skin penetration increases, the Dalton size decreases. Looking at this chart, if we look at something and we say, okay, skin penetration is going to go down the closer we are to the 500 Dalton rule. So permeation of a cosmetic compound is completely and 100% molecular weight dependent. So you need to take that into consideration, or at least the scientists do, that are formulating skincare. We want something to go in, we have to take molecular weight into account. Now, when we look at peptides, which are the latest in skincare and the big buzz and growth factors, we have to look at the molecular weight. GHK, which is great and has been FDA approved for wound healing, 340 Daltons, which means that it's going to have a good permeation rate as far as Dalton size. However, most peptides are hydrophilic, which means they're formulated in a water base. So even though the Dalton size is correct, you're not going to get good permeation or penetration because it's not an oil-loving product unless we do some other mechanical means to get it in. And we look at some of these others. Acetyl tripeptide, matrixyl 3000, the growth factors, you'll see growth factors are at 6,000 Daltons. So all of these great growth factors that are out there, most of them are in the 1,000 Dalton range and cannot actually make it into the body without applying some kind of physical or chemical property to it to get it in. It doesn't just passively go into the body. So all these skincare companies that are selling their growth factors and we're putting them on the skin and we're hoping they're making changes over time, the growth factors are not what's doing the work because they're not even making it in. And one of the big people on transdermal delivery, his quote says, "There is a large gap for permeability coefficient of major cosmeceutical peptides and proteins, and researchers should focus on this ambiguity to find more efficient substances with better permeability." So we have all these great topicals, but they're not able to make it into the body. So what they do is they test them in a lab and they say, oh, we're seeing all this great growth. This is so wonderful. However, when we actually apply them to the skin, we don't see these same changes because they don't actually make it to a cellular level where they can be utilized. That's where dermakinetics has come into play and is extremely exciting because now what we can do is we can get a lot of these topicals that have been created deep into the layers below where they can be utilized by the cells. So what specifically is dermakinetics? First of all, it's patented, which means no other device on the market can utilize this technology. We are the only ones worldwide that can utilize this technology. And it's a transdermal delivery process that uses specific wavelengths and very specific pulses of light to drive large amounts of these skincare compounds, such as the peptides we just talked about, vitamin C, hyaluronic, deep into the layers below, where they can reach a cellular level and can make all kinds of significant changes to the cells and tissue surrounding it. So dermakinetics is extremely exciting. If we take a look at now the permeation coefficient as we talked about before, as we said, as permeation, as a topical reaches the 500 Daltons, permeation decreases. So the larger the weight of the molecule, the less permeation we're going to get. That no longer applies with dermakinetics. It doesn't matter if it's 500 Daltons, 10,000 Daltons, or 2 million Daltons. We're still able to provide delivery of these compounds regardless of the molecular weight. So that's where dermakinetics is really exciting because now all of a sudden we can get large molecules delivered into the tissue. Well, how does it work? Basically the way it works is you apply the topical to the skin. So after we've done our light therapy, we've cleansed the skin, and we're making sure it's ready, we go ahead and we apply topicals. Now we have to apply topicals that have been tested and are very pure formulations so they don't cause an adverse reaction because we're getting a large percentage to a cellular level. So we apply these topicals to the layers of the skin. Next, what happens is we place the topicals under specific pulses of LED light for a given amount of time. And what happens is that light will pulse on and off, and you won't even notice it pulsing on and off because it's pulsing anywhere between 50 to 150 times per second. And so as the light pulses off, the molecules are stimulated. So the repeated on-off stimulation of the molecules cause them to move into and through the tissue. So skin permeation and deposition start to change significantly when we use dermakinetics. So the first thing is we have selected pulses of LED light that cause a molecule to flex back and forth. And if you look at this vitamin C molecule on the screen right here, you'll notice that here it is in the resting phase. Here it is in the stimulated phase. So what happens is the light starts to pulse on and off, causing the molecule to flex back and forth, which gives it the ability to move. And that movement is what is able to go ahead and generate it into and through the skin tissue and through that intercellular route we talked about before. I like to think of it kind of like my husband, who sits on the couch and watches TV, and he does not move, and he pretends like I don't exist. And I am like the light, and I go over and I start poking him. Take out the trash. Honey, take out the trash. Take out the trash. Take out the trash. And so here I am nagging him over and over and over again to take out the trash. At some point, he starts to move. And he moves a little bit more and a little bit more until eventually my nagging causes him to move away from me far enough to where he can't hear me anymore. The same thing starts to happen with the molecules when the light is pulsing. The light pulses on and off, on and off, on and off, enough to where it agitates that molecule from the resting to the stimulated phase, where that molecule will actually use that energy to get as far away from the pulsing light as possible. If the pulsing light is above the skin tissue, that molecule will have no option but to go forth, which is into and through the layers of the skin so that it can get far enough away from the pulsing light and go back to the resting phase. Molecules are like men. They want to be in the resting phase. They don't want to be moving. They want to be as sound and unnagged as possible. So when we have that nagging blue light pulsing on and off, we nag them and to the point where all of a sudden they want to get away from the light into the layers below and get away from that pulsing. So the on-off cycle is repeated many, many times per second. The kinetic energy or the motion causes the molecules to move into and through the tissue. And what that happens then is you have significant skin penetration and you have significant deposition where it can be utilized by the body. And if you think about it, back in 2004, it was proven that all molecules have this hinging effect. So all molecules have the ability to hinge and rotate and flex back and forth. And one of our sales reps was able to use the analogy of a piece of paper. Imagine a piece of paper trying to get through a fence. If you do not fold or change that piece of paper at all, it's not going to be able to make it through a chain link fence. However, if you can fold that piece of paper up into a smaller entity, you can pass it through the chain link fence, get it to where it needs to go, and then unfold it, and it can be utilized at that point. So since all molecules have a hinging effect, we can cause those molecules using the pulsing blue light to hinge, change shape, but not change what they are, get them to where they need to go and be deposited. So here we look at GHK. Before we said GHK is around the 350 Dalton range. Passively, we can see that a small amount will make it in. Not very much because it is, again, hydrophilic, not lipophilic. So we get it to where it needs to go. However, now when we apply the properties and principles of dermakinetics, the pulsing on-off blue light, we can see that we can significantly increase the amount of GHK that's being delivered. Same with the vitamin C. We can put vitamin C on the skin, and a small amount will make it in. They'll make it into the hair follicles, appendages, and drive a little bit in through the intercellular route. However, when we apply dermakinetic principles to that same vitamin C, now we can multiply that up to 50 times greater and get that much more topical delivered. They have been able to do this with Botox. Botox is usually delivered with needle injections. The reason being is because it can't make it through the intercellular route. It's 149,000 Daltons. It will not passively go into and through the skin. However, when we take the topical Botox, we apply it on the skin, we've seen, especially with cadaver testing, that we can go ahead and use the principles of dermakinetics and drive a significant amount of the Botox into and through the skin using the dermakinetic principles, the on-off pulsing of the light. Same with hyaluronic acid. A lot of people love hyaluronic acid. They use it all the time, but very, very little goes in because most hyaluronic acid is between 1 and 2 million Daltons. It is a significantly huge molecule. It'll affect the stratum corneum, make that feel tight, but it's not doing a whole lot on a cellular level to make any kind of changes because nothing is making it in, or very, very little. So using dermakinetics now, all of a sudden, we can get significant amount in and through the body. Now, permeation and deposition, how much is going to go in and be deposited, are wavelength and pulse rate dependent. So if we look at this particular protein here on the left, you'll see that 8 cycles per second, that means it pulsed off, on and off 8 times in a single second, we got X amount delivered. 24 times, more was delivered. 60, it started to drop. 100, it went up significantly. So the number of pulses, how much nagging is needed to make a specific molecule move, changes. Not all molecules move with the same amount of nagging. So one protein might move at 100 cycles per second. A vitamin C might move at 60 cycles per second. So we've gone in and done the testing on specific topicals to find out how much pulsing needs to occur to get that permeation, to get that deposition, to get it into and through the skin. And so when we look at deposition as well, so not only does it have to permeate and get into the body, it has to stay there where it can be utilized. And that is all based on the number of cycles per second that it's going to flash on and on, the pulses per second. Now here we're looking at a photomicrograph of protein. So they've taken the cadaver skin and they've taken a look at, and this is the protein they're using here is insulin. On the left, you can see the insulin is on top of the stratum corneum. And this is only at 40 times magnification, so it's not a significant amount of magnification. And so below, you'll see the epidermis and the dermis. And you'll notice on the left, not much of any of the fluorescent color is seen below. And that skin is at an angle. So that particular skin you'll see right below in the bottom left-hand corner, it's very, very dark. Very little, if any, can make it in using insulin. On the right side, however, you can see using the dermakinetic process, we have a significant amount going in. And you'll notice on the stratum corneum, you'll see bright fluorescent spots. Those are considered hot spots. Those are the bottom of the sebaceous glands and the hair follicles. Well, large amounts are making it in. And you'll see a significant more is making it into and through the body. So protein, such as insulin, is a very, very, very large molecule. But using these pulses on and off, we're able to drive these molecules into and through the intercellular route. Now, how is dermakinetics any better than anything else being offered today, like our microneedling or our sonophoresis or iontophoresis? Well, a lot of these other things that are out there have a lot of limitations associated with them. For example, if we look at the passive patch, the nicotine patch, it has to be smaller than 500 Daltons. Any ingredient larger than 500 Daltons is not going to make it into and through the skin. So it has to be smaller, which creates quite a bit of limitations. Also can't use it with peptides. So there's different things that limits what we can and can't do. If we look at galvanic or we look at the iontophoresis, which is a pretty popular one, we look at and we say, okay, we can't use that with peptides because it's greater than 2,000 Daltons and it can't have a positive and negative charge because it will create molecular damage. So it has a lot of limitations there. And we also look at the skin surface. How much skin surface can we do? And it's very, very limited. Can't do very much at all. With the microneedling that seems to be really popular right now, once we open up the skin with the holes, the poration, To allow the topicals to penetrate, we allow other things that shouldn't go into the skin to be delivered also. So we can't turn it on and off, so it doesn't have an on-off purge function. So there's quite a few limitations existing in the technology here. So what makes Dermakinetics so exciting to not only the market of anti-aging, but the medical market in general, is that it can cover a large surface area. It creates no molecular damage and no skin damage. You don't have to cause any pain or damage to the skin. It can be used on ablated skin. So if you do a laser treatment on somebody or you do a significant peel on somebody and you want to get Dermakinetics right in there, you can do Dermakinetics immediately following a peel or CO2, and you can rehydrate and you can get all kinds of wound healing like the GHK delivered in a high percentage, so it will improve your client results significantly. And it can be used with wide chemical properties. Doesn't matter if it's hydrophilic or lipophilic. Doesn't matter if it's oil-based now or water-based, we can still get it in. So your acne clients before that we didn't want to use lipophilic topicals on, now we can use a hydrophilic form and know that we're going to get a large deposition. We're going to get a large amount deposited. Doesn't matter, you don't have to have a positive or negative charge. We don't have to worry about it destroying the molecule itself by putting an electrical charge to it. And it can be used with peptides, which peptides are bioengineered and can be communicated to do all kinds of amazing things in a lab setting. Now here we've used just Dermakinetics before and after by itself. You'll notice the chin area in particular, right here, the creping that has changed significantly over time. Same here, the chin creping has changed significantly over time, and that's from topical delivery. So we're talking 8 treatments of topical delivery. There's no topical on the market today that you use that's going to give you that kind of changes because you can't get that kind of deposition. Same with the skin pigmentation changes, the even out coloring. Here we've treated one side over the other. And if you look at the eyelid tightening in particular, that was significant, as well as the changes under the eye. Here's one where the lighting is, he does not have a hat on. He has a hat on, so it changes the lighting slightly, but you can still see the same changes. The eyelid over here tightening and the under eye changes. Now a standard Dermakinetic anti-aging protocol, the way it would work is you would go ahead and clean the skin if you're doing just Dermakinetics. And you properly prepare the skin, removing any stratum corneum and dead skin cells that you can. The more you remove, the better the penetration. Then you apply your 2 layers of topicals. Right now, all the ones that we offer are in 2 layers, a serum followed by a cream. And then you expose those topicals to specific pulses of light for 30 minutes. All of the ones we have currently available is a 30-minute process. So they lay under the light for 30 minutes. And so that 30-minute time period is enough netting to cause a large deposition into the body. And they do this twice a week for 4 weeks. The total treatments they generally need are 8 treatments, and this is on an average skin type. Someone who's older is going to need more, and someone who's younger is going to need less. But your average individual, average skin type 3 with visible damage but not significant damage will generally see and only need need 8 treatments over time. Now, the other things that we're currently investigating for medical uses through our photokinetic branch is we're looking at using the same technology to deliver lidocaine, Botox, which human trials are underway, insulin delivery for diabetics, so they would actually wear a system that's very similar to the Lightwave, but it would be a small system that would have the lights pulse on and off to deliver insulin instead of having insulin injections. B12 delivery, and at the University of Texas Medical Branch, which is where Photokinetics is housed, that's where they're doing their ocular drug delivery. A large amount of testing is being done so they can deliver all kinds of medications using this Dermakinetic process for glaucoma and macular degeneration. So a lot of different things are happening with Dermakinetics. We just launched it back in June, so more and more topicals keep coming out. We currently have pigmentation available, anti-aging available, and post-ablative care available. We have collagen mask coming out in the next week and a half. We also have a cellulite treatment that will be available soon. And the reason you can't just use any topical is because it's very specific on the pulse rate. Different molecules move under different pulses. So we've had to go through and spend the last 6, 7 years testing which molecules will move and how much and where it will be deposited and how does that equate to changes on the skin and what does that look like. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes into dermakinetics, but basically comes down to pulses of light cause these topicals to move into and through the skin. So we've talked about Lightwave, and with Lightwave we're using light to make changes in the body. Dermakinetics, we're using topicals to make changes in the body. And now we're going to talk just briefly about ABI dermaceuticals with our Power Pure Skincare. And ABI is where we go ahead and we use topicals to protect the skin from the results we've achieved with Lightwave